Hey guys, it's Rick Ginn, and welcome to my three-part series on creative financing, where I decided to take the time and break down creative financing and make it super simple for anyone who's considering it. Now, the first series I'm going to go over today is explaining creative financing, explaining why a seller would consider creative financing, the basic agreement of how the transaction works, and most importantly, what is the benefit to you, the real estate investor. We're going to go ahead and put that all together today. On the second series, we're going to break down and explain creative financing terms. The idea is to make it super simple. I find people make this wildly complex between lawyers and gurus explaining it. I'm going to make it super simple. In the second part of the series, I'm going to show you the three different types of creative financing you can use to take advantage of traditional people do not fit in the wholesaling model. And then the final part of the series, series 3, is kind of the most important part, is how to explain creative financing terms, and more importantly, how to present it to your sellers. So if you want to sit back, learn all about creative financing, I got 21 years in this business. I want to show you how it breaks down. Do me a favor before you get into it. Make sure you smash that like button, hit that subscribe button so more people can find out on how creative financing really works. So without further ado, let's dive into it. So what I want to do is give you like some visual, because I'm a visual person and I find it really helps in teaching instead of just sitting here lecturing to you. So I want to break down how this works out. So most of you that are watching this know that me and Zach love wholesaling. In fact, I'm going to tell you right now, I believe everyone who wants to be involved in real estate investing, if you want the highest and best skill set, I always start with wholesaling. Why? It has the largest reward with the smallest amount of risk. I've proven this over 21 years. My son's 8 years into the business. He started at 16, and I'm here to tell you it has never changed. In fact, wholesaling has been around long before I ever started, and it'll be here long after I'm gone. So I've never claimed to invent wholesaling. I don't believe. Actually, it's been going on for hundreds of years. It's documented in Washington, D.C. If you don't believe me, go over there and check it out. So I'm never going to be the guy that claims I invented this. The same holds true in creative financing. It's been around forever. And I want you to understand creative financing is, the word creative is the real essence of it. And I want you to think of creative financing is when you don't have to go through a traditional bank. 95% of all real estate transactions are usually have some sort of bank loan attached to it. And not everything has to go through a bank. And that's where creative financing comes on. So number one, you're a wholesaler. And I want to give you a graphical representation how this works, because a lot of people go, hey, I'll just quit wholesaling and do creative financing because it's easier. That's not the case. You're still going to have to do the work in creative financing. The best way to do it, in my opinion, is to do your wholesaling business, get as many leads as possible, and the leads don't work out. I'm going to teach you how to use creative financing like a tool in your belt. The more tools you have, the more problems you can solve. The more problems you can solve, the more money you'll make. And honestly, what I love about creative financing is it really satisfies your fulfillment, meaning you can really help people that nobody else has been able to help. And that's really cool. So most people that get really good at creative financing, they do it with experience and over time. So it took me a good 5 years for me to wrap my head around the concepts, how it works. And I tried some, I failed miserably on some of them, and I learned a lot, and I've done very successful deals from it. So the purpose of today is to streamline you and show you how simple this is. And if you want to be a wholesaler, I would always recommend doing wholesaling first. I find people that skip wholesaling and go straight to creative financing, they miss out on a lot of great opportunities. So if you're a wholesaler, I want to give you a graphical representation of your business. So if you think about this, this is your leads funnel. So we'll call this a leads funnel. So I apologize for my handwriting. It just is what it is. You guys don't care about my handwriting. And what happens is your leads come in. And they flow in. It can be from driving for dollars, reverse driving for dollars, It can be from direct mail. I mean, this goes on and on, guys. And when your leads come in, the first way you attack it is usually going to be wholesaling through a cash offer. Why do we do this approach first? Because, guys, I like to grab deals that need cash. Why? Because you can generate cash up front, which is why most people get into wholesaling. And you guys know, if you want to learn how to do wholesaling from start to finish without all the hassles of a guru, go over to freewholesaling.com. Me and my son have taught it. We're approaching 4 years right now. It is the #1 training video in wholesaling in the world, not just in the United States. I get international investors that come over here that do deals right here in their backyard. So if you want to learn how to do wholesaling, your first deal to your first 100 grand, go over to freewholesaling.com. Today, we're talking about creative financing. So rule number 1, be a wholesaler. Why? Because you're still going to get deals. These deals will generate cash for you. Without wholesaling, you're not going to have any cash. Now, some of you are just trying to dig out of a hole. Some of you want to get financial freedom and freedom of your time. Wholesaling will do that for you. The problem is if you start with creative financing, it does take time to harvest the money out of it. And if you're not generating upfront cash, you're going to run out of money and you're going to run out of time. And so you can use wholesaling to fill those gaps. In my opinion, wholesaling is the greatest trainer for you to be a super marketer, which is going to be required in this business. The essence of wholesaling is learning how to market. The second part is learning how to talk to people and negotiating. So a lot of people get into creative financing and they don't really learn to talk to people. The best cure to that is time, meaning a time and a lot of repetition. So I always want you to start with wholesaling so we can generate some cash. Wholesaling is actually easy. It's just us people make it hard. Most people want to get to the cash without doing the work. You're going to have the same issue in creative financing. You are going to have to do the work. People who target just creative financing, unless you have a very high skill set and an incredible influence and a major lead flow, you're going to struggle in creative financing if that's all you do up front. But it's your choice. I'd rather you do both. I find people that figure out wholesaling and are successful in that have a easy gravitation towards creative financing. Honestly, the more you do in this business, the better off you're going to be. So let's face it, I go to a cash offer. The next one I do is we do have deals that we just have to refer to the realtor. Either they owe too much money, either they want too much money and they want the full white glove service. And honestly, you can't make people sell you a deal. And I don't find them. When they want to go to a realtor, I instantly bounce them out and I ask for my marketing fee. So how much should you get a marketing fee? I go over this all on freewholesaling.com. A minimum I ever would accept is 25%. I ask for 50, but most of the times I wind up in a third. Keep in mind, I don't have to do any work for it. So if there winds up being a $9,000 commission, I get $3,000. Why? Because I spend time, energy, and money getting leads. And if I'm going to give a lay down to a realtor, I expect a marketing fee in return, and so should you. Now, what do we do when we get past that? Keep in mind, everybody coming in this funnel at this point, let me mark this here, is I always talk about motivated sellers. And that is an absolute requirement when it comes to wholesaling. If they're not motivated, you are dealing with the wrong people. And if you constantly try to shove cash offers down people's throats that want full retail, that don't want a discount, that want above market price, you're going to drive yourself nuts. So if you're having that situation in wholesaling, I want you to understand this. You're marketing to the wrong people. Make the adjustments. Go over to freewholesaling.com. We go into great depth on how to pull the right list and techniques to actually connect with motivated sellers. So I find a lot of wholesalers get trapped in this. But remember, we're filtering out ones that are going to have to, they want full price. There's nothing you can do with them. Honestly, a lot of times creative financing doesn't work until they list their properties and they realize they're not going to get what they want. Now, when it comes to creative financing, this is another tool you have to solve homeowners' problems. Now, I will tell you this. Creative financing, you don't need a motivated seller. Does it help? Absolutely. But here's the minimum requirement to do a creative financing deal. You ready? They have to be wanting to sell. They don't want to sell. I can't convince people to sell. Realtors convince people to sell. I don't. So whenever you try to shove a sale down someone's mouth in real estate, period, it usually doesn't work out well. And the only way you can do some is usually pie in the sky numbers. I don't do that. So the only shift we're making here is wholesaling requires a motivated seller. I don't occasionally get lucky, but for the most part, good deals with deep discounts have to have issues. Divorce, death, loss of job, downgrade, upgrade sometimes. There's so many things that have to happen, legal action, and it usually creates a financial strain on the family, and the house goes south, and eventually they have to make a decision to sell, and they can't do it traditionally with a realtor. That's basically our wholesaling method. It's worked forever. I love the model because it's really never changed. It has changed progressively really in the last 7 years, but it's mostly technology and speed. But the mechanics and the fundamentals of wholesaling is always going to be the same. So now we switch over to creative financing. And if you go in this, you should be able to help any person that comes through your lead funnel. You have to capture and take advantage of anyone who needs help. Remember, in this business, the more people you help, the more money you make. And honestly, the more satisfying it is. So let's go through a graphical representation of what a creative finance transaction is going to look like. Once again, I'm going to give you a visual representation. So we have a couple ways I'm going to show you. So I'm going to draw two graphs. I want you to think of a seesaw. And on one side, you have the seller, and then you have you, the wholesaler. And then we'll do on this side, seller, and then you, the wholesaler. So, a seesaw, you got to get two people roughly the same size to balance it out. And as long as you get this visual clue, once again, the fundamentals of creative financing is you can't make people do a deal. They've got to come to the table. They've got to need help. And your job is to offer them a solution based on the information they give you. So in scenario number one, if you tried the wholesaling method and you gave your seller a little bit of tiny money, and you got a smoking deal, say you even did it with cash or terms, this goes with either one. Basically, the seller doesn't get what they want, you get everything you want. Do you really think that deal is going to work out? And I'll tell you right now, it never does. Even if you enter in a contract, they're going to have buyer's remorse, seller's remorse, and they're going to find a way to get out of it. And if you find yourself in this situation, it means you're forcing deals. So let's go over to the other way to do it. Say the seller gets a ton of money. Oops. Say the seller gets a ton of money and your terms are terrible, or even your cash, if you're doing a wholesaling deal, you're not going to be able to sell the deal. And guess what? The deal's not going to work out. And so many people go through this. You can have the same problem in creative financing if you don't think about the ends to the means. And here's what I mean by this. This is what I want you to understand is what you truly want to do. If you think about a seesaw and every real estate transaction, this is how it works. If you think about the fundamentals, you have the seller and you have you. So if we're going to do a creative financing deal, the seller has to get something that makes them satisfied, that solves their problem. That's your job. You got to figure that out. And you, in exchange, have to get your terms. Now, in most of these transactions, the sellers are set on a certain price, right? Here's the key, guys. If you give them their price, you have to get your terms in exchange. You see, you can't give them their price and then you get really bad terms. That is not a balanced seesaw, and it's not going to work out in the long run. Remember, we want long-term success, period. That's the way great real estate investors work. I never want to pit against a homeowner, an investor, or anyone else and hope for their failure. There's a lot of people out there that do all sorts of creative financing, hoping that they get the house back. I never want the house back. So I want to do a balanced deal. So if you think about a balanced deal, I want you to understand the balanced equation like on a seesaw. I tell you this in wholesaling, the exact same true as in creative financing. I can't stress it enough. It has to be a win-win. Win, win. Without a win-win, these deals don't work. So let's go a step further. Why would a seller do creative financing? Simple. Seller, why would they do creative financing? Guys, this is easy. I want you to understand this. I'm going to give you the basic overview of it. Ready? So the first one, a lot of them have equity issues. Some have interest rate issues. The key word is issues. What do I mean? Maybe they owe too much on the property. Maybe they have a restriction against their loan. Sometimes people get these special grants programs. In the South, they're known as SHIP, and they have to wait X amount of years. And if they sell the house and transfer the deed before then, they have to repay a sizable loan, sometimes up to $50,000 or $100,000. That would be a major issue. Sellers might have tax issues. Remember, not everybody owns a home personally. Sometimes they're investment properties, sometimes they're commercial, and they have to own it a certain amount of years. Maybe they have a business that's making a ton of money and they don't want to dump all this cash and pay a capital gains on it and pay this massive tax bill, and they want to defer it. Sometimes older people, I find the older landlords love to defer their tax liability. They love to do creative financing deals. Let's talk about costs. We have closing costs, which can eat up to 3% of a deal, a significant amount of money. Realtor's cost, I don't need to go over this with you. That can be another 6%. And then a lot of people overlook this one, the cost of capital. And if you guys haven't seen interest rates lately, it's expensive to go get these loans. They're complicated, and I don't have to run you through the underwriting of the loan itself. And a lot of times the new buyer has to be underwritten, and it doesn't always work out perfectly. We talk about the convenience factor. When you don't have to jump through 3 million hoops for a bank, these transactions are so much stressless. And that's why a lot of sellers will work with you, because they feel confident the deal is going to get done. So many times when we do commercial transactions or we're waiting for a loan to fund, we're like waiting on pins and needles up to the closing day. You remove all that with creative financing because it's basically the buyer and the seller working together, and they both have an agenda to help each other out to make sure they achieve what they want in the transaction. That's the real benefit you get with creative financing. And then the last but not least is going to be flexibility. You're never going to get this with a bank, and you're also going to get control. And the thing is, a lot of times you think, wow, the investor feels like they're in control. No, the seller and the buyer both feel if they're in control of the transaction, that gives both parties confidence, and they both want a win-win situation. So when hiccups come up, they work together to solve it instead of working through like an underwriter in a bank. Bottom line, guys, creative financing, there is more than one way to skin a cat, as they say. And I'm telling you, when wholesaling doesn't work out, when traditional realtors don't work out, and when you just can't get the bank to comply and stuff like that, this is what pushes people towards creative financing. And you've got to put this in your tool belt. So let's go to the next part. The most important part is, why would you, the investor, even consider doing creative financing? Number one, not everything can be taken down wholesaling. I wish it could. But the reality is there is only a small amount of houses that fit in wholesaling's parameters. Even I admit it. And the reality is we spend all our effort marketing to a very niche type of seller through specialty government lists, whatever it be, high equity sellers. And most of your effort is in the hunting and the marketing. And I find in wholesaling, I really don't sell people anything. And the same thing in creative financing. I educate myself on their offers. I carefully listen to their solution, and I craft a solution that solves their problem. And in the end, I find out what the seller truly wants to achieve. And if you can do that, you can make an amazing amount of money through creative financing. But why would the wholesaler, let's just call it wholesaler, investor. And by the way, you don't have to be a wholesaler. I'm just telling you the truth. You're going to be better off as a wholesaler because you can generate cash. I meet more creative financing people that are broke because they're not trying to generate cash up front. And that's where wholesaling will solve that part. So if you're a wholesaler or an investor, why creative financing? Let's think about this. Say you want to go out and buy a investment property and it's 300 grand. How does this work? Now, it's not your primary home, so you're going to have much more stringent underwriting requirements. What do I mean? So if you want to go to a bank loan, you're basically going to have to get about 20 to 25% down. So let's give you the conservative one. Just say you get away with 20. That's $60,000 before you've even spent a dime on anything else. You're like, man, that's a lot of money. It is. And remember, you can generate that cash through wholesaling. That's what I do to buy properties. But it doesn't stop there. What's your next expense coming up? Then you're going to have your closing cost. On average, let's face it, guys, between realtors, expense and stuff like that, let's just say around 5%, because you're the buyer. So basically the seller is absorbing the realtor fees, hopefully depending on how the commissions are structured. So that's $15,000 in closing cost. So right off the bat, you're at 75K. And I'm going to tell you, that's if everything goes perfect. The reality is this number could push as high as 100K. And guys, this is just one property. You're going to have strict terms. This is the challenge. How many properties can you buy like this? That's the reason why I like creative financing, because it allows you to leverage without getting the bank's permission. And as I'm talking to you, a lot of you younger wholesalers, let's face it, you probably don't have the credit. You don't have a lot of skill set in buying deals on a commercial level. So the bank's going to do two things. They're going to underwrite the deal and they're going to underwrite you. Now, they'll start avoiding underwriting you when you show a track record, but in the beginning, you don't have one. So you're going to be at a huge disadvantage. Most investors aren't even going to qualify for these types of loans for the cash up front and then the cash flow to service the debt on it. So they're going to look at your personal credit and they're going to underwrite the deal. Until you get a track record, you're still going to be in the equation. And a lot of times it's you that's the problem. Maybe it's your credit, your lack of income. We have to fix all this. How do you fix it? Creative financing. So let's talk about the real benefits of why we do it. So this is if you use a bank, guys. And I don't want you to do that. Listen, when you get to my level, you can use a bank for whatever you want. But honestly, I prefer to do creative financing over a bank. Why? It's much less hassle. It's usually much more profitable for me, and it's easier for me to go out and find deals. So creative financing's pluses, we'll call it. Number one, less cash down. Meaning you get more favorable terms with a private deal through creative financing as opposed to the bank dictating the terms. Next one, you get monthly cash flow. Listen, guys, the monthly cash flow is what's truly going to make you free in the long run. All creative financing deals have to have some sort of positive cash flow. My recommendation is $400 to $500 minimum because you can't predict the future. You get enough creative financing deals, the income keeps stacking up. That's how you truly get wealthy in real estate. Wholesaling is great. Don't get me wrong. It'll generate cash. But to truly make it passive income, the monthly cash flow is what we're looking for. So when we're talking about monthly cash flow, we're talking about what you pay the seller and what your income net difference is. So if you're paying the seller $1,000 a month and you're getting $1,700 a month for property, that's $700 a month. They're like, well, Rick, how does that work? I call it finance arbitrage. And what does this mean? This is really cool. And a lot of people miss this in creative financing. So what I want to do is share a graphic on the screen with you and explain. So if you look up on the screen, this is the most simplest graphic I can show you to explain how an amortization schedule works. The amortization is set by the bank. They are the bank's rules. And most people conform to this. I go way outside the box when I do that. But if you do a traditional loan, if you look here, this is your interest rate. So when the loan starts in the first payment, most of the money predominantly goes to interest, about 70 to 75%. And then this is your principal. And as you get in the loan matures, say this is a 30-year loan, about halfway through, it switches and you start to pay more principal than you do interest. And this is the finance arbitrage. Most people go, well, I got a loan at 2.5 and I'm selling it on a wrap at 8%. And they call that interest arbitrage. That's the tiny little money. And don't get me wrong, it's awesome. But the reality is, if you take over a loan and say they're 10 years into it and you take it over, the real value goes here. If you look at this line, say we're around 10 years here, which would be right about here. If you're making $1,000 a month payment to a mortgage company, 500 of it is going to pay down the principal. So you actually are reducing the debt every month that a payment is made. And if you catch a loan halfway through, it is golden finance arbitrage at its best, because you're getting much more pay down of the loan. And the idea is, if you own the property 10 or 20 years, it could be paid in full for you. It's absolutely amazing. And I'll give you an example. I did a deal not too long ago that I bought it. I was going through this. We're kind of in a rush. And my underwriter pointed out it's a 15-year loan. Here's the really cool part. She was in year 8 of a 15-year loan. Almost all the money was going towards principal, which completely changes the math on the deal. And honestly, I missed it. And I still wrote the deal like it was 30 years and found out we were getting an extra $600 a month in cash flow towards paying off the debt. Now, you don't get that right away, but you get closer to cashing out the property. This is what we call finance arbitrage. There's the interest rate. If you get one at 3% and say you're selling it on your own terms at 8%, that is a 6% disparity. On a bigger note, $300,000 to $500,000, it is a significant amount of money. But the more important one is the length of the loan. If you get a 15-year loan and you catch it midway, remember, the debt gets paid off and serviced much faster based on the amortization. If you guys look it up, you'll understand how these graphs work, and it works real well. Okay, so back to our screen. That's how finance arbitrage works. It's really, really cool. And a lot of people overlook this, and there is a ton of money. Can you imagine getting $600 a month for the next 60 months? That is a significant amount of money, and most people don't even know it's there. And if you understand it, doing creative financing, you get to play with terms like this. And that's where the word creative financing comes in. You also get money when you dispo the deal. We'll go over that in a little bit more detail. That's basically when you sell it on a wrap, owner financing, you option it, whatever you want to do, but there is money at the end of it. Also, I never bank on appreciation, but we're foolish to ignore it. We all want appreciation, but like my worst case scenario, my creative finance deals, if the property doesn't appreciate, as long as it cash flows and it minimizes my risk, meaning it is a high quality property and it's going to be easy to keep generating cash flow, I don't bank on the appreciation. The appreciation is the cream on the top. And in the last few years, it's been absolutely amazing. Now, I don't bank on it, but the one thing we all love about real estate, it is an appreciating asset, unlike a car, a boat, or anything else. And it's truly one of the few asset classes that you can bank in the long run that you will get appreciation. Now, when you get the appreciation, there's certain market conditions that you and me don't control, so I never bank on it. But what I do bank on, you ready? Depreciation. And without getting into all the fancy parts of it, this is basically a tax benefit. So I don't want to get in the legalities of it. I'm not a CPA, I'm not a lawyer, but when you take control of a property through creative financing or you own it on your own, you can actually get the benefits of depreciating it. So depending on what type of asset class is a single family home to a commercial, between 20 and I think it's some of them are up to 39 years, 27. I don't get into the weeds on it. They tell me what the depreciation gets. But on a typical single family home, you can spread it out over 20 years. Like, what do you mean, Rick? So if a home is worth $300,000, basically you get to write off 15 grand a year of that. Like, what do you mean? Actually, it offsets your tax. Well, I don't understand. Why would I depreciate it? Because it goes up in value and you get to depreciate it. And if you do enough of them, you can offset your taxes. Remember, the rules to taxes, if you read the rules, you can actually take advantage of it. The government has created an incentive for us to do it. There's all sorts of loopholes in here that you can do it through depreciation. You get accelerated depreciation. You can write off the furniture if it's a short-term rental. It's absolutely amazing. And for this, then you go, well, Rick, don't I have to recapture? You do, but if the appreciation goes up and the loan gets paid off, you're going to wind up winning no matter what happens. So depreciation is often overlooked, but is a huge benefit to these deals. Also, let's talk about this. A lot of you guys focus so heavy on hard money to do everything. They call it hard money for a reason. It's not easy. What if you replaced your hard money by doing creative financing deals and let your sellers be your bank? You got to start thinking outside the box. Hard money is traditional and it's set, and it's called hard for a reason. And most people struggle with it, and hard money people, they're perfectly fine taking your asset away from you if you don't perform. Do a solution with the seller, and it is significantly cheaper. It is much easier, and it'll work out with both parties in the long run. I believe much more. There is a place for hard money to put a transaction together, but it shouldn't be for every deal. So if you can get rid of the hard money is basically a loan. Now you get speed, but in exchange, you basically get a partner because it is expensive. And the last thing you get with all creative financing deals, in my opinion, is speed. Speed kills in this business. You don't have to sit around 3 months trying to get it all together. Sometimes you can put together a deal within a few days. Now, that takes experience. Don't panic. Most deals can be taken down in 30 to 45 days. You've got to get the right paperwork and everything put together. We're going to go in more detail into that. So guys, this is the fundamentals of creative financing. Today was all about giving you a visual representation of how it works and how you can tie it into your wholesaling business. Remember, the more you simplify things and learn to communicate to people, the easier it is for everybody involved. I'm not trying to talk on a high level. I'm just like you. I am no different. I love creative financing. It took me a long time to understand it through trial and error and trying different techniques. I did not create creative financing. Nobody has. It's been around forever. I want you to use this as a tool in your wholesaling toolbox. Remember, the more people you can help out, the more money you can make and the more satisfying this business is. So guys, this is everything in the first part of the series on creative financing. And make sure you follow up on the next part of the series, which we're going to break down creative financing terms and show you the 3 different options you can do in financing. And make sure you tune back for the final series on how to talk to sellers to present creative financing terms and learn how to talk to them. So guys, if you got value from this video, do me a favor, smash that like button, hit that subscribe button. This is Rick Ginn, and I will see you in the next series in creative financing.